So 7.5 is choosing appropriate rates and units. And basically we're looking at different story problems and saying, well, how would you measure that, or that type of thing. Rates would be a ratio where the units are different, so like miles per hour, inches per day, something like that, pounds per year. So as far as what do we mean by appropriate units, if you're looking at like how fast a car is going, often you'd use miles per hour, right? Or pretty much always use miles per hour. So if I say 30 miles per hour, that probably means something to you. You can picture that's probably about how fast you would on like a neighborhood street. If you're riding a bike, that'd be like down a hill most likely. Most people can't get up to 30 on the flats. If instead of 30 miles per hour I were to say, I'm going 40,000 inches per minute, that doesn't really tell you much, right? Because we can't really picture, okay, 40,000 inches, how far is that in a minute? Would I have to be going fast? Would I be going slow? Is that like a walking pace? Is that like a sprint? Is that like a highway? So you don't really have a good idea how fast you're going. So that's kind of what I mean by this whole choosing appropriate units. I'm just going to kind of like write down 2 rules of thumb and then do a couple examples, 3 examples, and be done. So I'm going to say pick, and I'm going to put reasonable in quotation marks. Reasonable units. And that's kind of generic because what's reasonable? But it'd be like miles per hour for a car, something like that. How fast your hair grows, you probably wouldn't go with miles per hour. Maybe like inches per month or inches per week or something like that, centimeters per whatever, millimeters per week. Okay, the second thing I want to say is unit rates are nice. So unit, and then we'll go back to what those are again. So unit rates are nice. And if you forgot those from a chapter or 2 ago, you could write down if you wanted to, it's a number divided by 1. Or if you come up with a story problem, well, let's just do one quick a second. Basically, you divide the numbers. Maybe I'll take that arrow out of there. But when you get a fraction, you divide the numbers to change it into a unit rate. So let's do an example that'll help that make a lot more sense. Let's say you're going hunting, and over the course of a few years, you shoot 4 deer, and it takes you 7 bullets to do it. So either you miss or you need to have a second bullet to put the deer out of its misery. Sorry, feels mean. Okay, 4 divided by 7, you could punch that into your calculator, right?
Yes, sir.
And if you do that, you come up with 0.57. So if I do this 4 divided by 7, I get the 0.57. So 0.57, same as 4 over 7. Now the units would be what over what? Yeah, deer per bullet. So you just keep those exact same things. So you have deer per bullet. So from here, this 0.57 then means, okay, on average, you kill, it takes you about 2 bullets to kill a deer. You get almost a half a deer, a little more than half a deer for every bullet you shoot. That example maybe has some holes in it, but let's say you're doing a different one. So a second example, if you're looking at the speed of a sprinter, so speed of sprinter, we have our first track meet coming up in a week or 2. If you're looking at 2 weeks, should be a little less than 2 weeks. If you're looking at how fast is somebody running, what units would you probably use? Don't need the number, just units. So it could be miles per hour, or it could be, if you go with metric, meters per second. Because that would work if you're doing the 100-meter dash. You could say, well, 100-meter dash in 13 seconds, do 100 divided by 13, you'd get your number of meters per second, something like that. If you were to look at, instead, you're watering your lawn or maybe even your shower head. If you're looking at the amount of water through a hose, amount of water through a hose, what would be decent units for amount of water through a hose? Go for it. That's the one I'd written down. That's my favorite. So gallons per minute. Because maybe you can picture kind of like a gallon paint can or maybe a 5-gallon bucket or something like that. You kind of have an idea about what a gallon is. And if you look at like, well, it'd take more than a minute probably to fill up your bucket. Or, I'm sorry. You can fill up a couple of those buckets in a minute, so it'd be gallons per minute. That makes a lot more sense than like drops per week, you water your lawn for like a week straight. It's like, yeah, I have like 42 trillion drops per week. And it's like, is that fast? Is that slow? All right, last one. My mom started getting gray hairs when I was a kid. I remember going down the road. My mom would pay my sister to pluck out gray hairs. So I'm going to say Mom paid my sister $1 for every 20 hairs. 20 gray hairs. Gray hairs. If we wanted to figure out the units for that, if you would say like, well, if we were to do dollars per hair, we want to figure out what's my sister getting paid. She got paid $1 for every 20 hairs. So does it make sense to write it that way? $1 divided by 20 hairs? Well, it's at least that's one way you could write it. If we were to go through and do the math then, we'd come up with $0.05 per hair. $0.05 is really what? 5 cents. So my mom used to pay her a nickel for every gray hair she pulled out. If you wanted to, you could change that then to, you could say, or 5 cents per hair. Now I remember them doing this while we were going down the road, kind of weird. But hey, it's the kind of family I live in. If you were to switch that around though, yeah, in the car. Yeah, we didn't always wear seatbelts back then. I'm the ripe old age of 27. Okay. If you were to take, and so really you could go with any of these things. You could say $1 per hair. The unit rates, though, are nice. So like this here or this here, I think makes more sense than the $1 for 20 hairs. If you wanted to, though, you could flip this over. Instead of saying dollars per hair, if you said hairs per dollar, do you agree you could flip that, and flipping it would give you 20 hairs per $1. So sometimes you may find you like the reciprocal better, that for every 20 hairs you pluck, you get $1. But really, any of those, I think this one on the far right is probably my favorite. 5 cents per hair makes the most sense to me. So, but any of those could end up working. I think on like a quiz, I'll probably have like several different answers. And even if your answer doesn't match mine, what I'd probably do is look at it and say, okay, is that a reasonable unit? Like our water one. If you did like drops per day, it's like, no. But gallons per minute, even like quarts per minute or something like that. I'll try to give you the benefit of the doubt.